She replaced her cousin at the wedding photography booth, unaware the single-dad CEO groom's brother falls for her. Just shoot, smile, pretend you belong. No one will know the difference. Mara Langford raised an eyebrow at her cousin already halfway, out the door with her suitcase. "You're insane." Her cousin blew a kiss. "I'm late for my flight. Just wear the badge, hold the camera, and keep your head down. Brides don't care who takes the pictures as long as they look good." Before Mira could protest, the door slammed shut. Just like that, she stood alone in a stranger's hotel suite, holding a camera she hadn't used in months, expected to work a wedding she wasn't invited to. 30 minutes later, Mira arrived at the venue, a sprawling coastal resort with too many windows and not enough shade. She walked through marble halls and white linen-draped chairs, feeling entirely out of place in her black jumpsuit and minimal makeup. Her blonde hair was tied back in a low ponytail. She kept her head down, hoping the mirrored sunglasses made her look more official. Nobody questioned her. That was the first surprise. The second came during the ceremony. She drifted along the edge of the crowd, snapping photos by muscle memory. Rings, vows, tearful father of the bride, all the right shots. But then something unscripted. Off to the side, a small girl sat cross-legged on the grass, shoes kicked off, fiddling with the ribbon on her dress. A man knelt beside her. He didn't speak loudly or make a show of comforting her. He simply took her foot, slid the shoe back on, tied the laces twice with a double loop, and brushed the hem of her dress like it was the most natural thing in the world. The little girl smiled up at him. Mira's hands moved before she even realized. Click. The shutter snapped just as he looked up. Their eyes met. The man, tall, late 30s maybe, in a navy suit, didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, steady and unreadable. Then, after a beat, he stood and lifted the girl into his arms with practiced ease. He was walking away when someone nearby whispered his name. "Rowan Blake, that's the groom's brother, the CEO." Oh, that explained the presence. Mara turned her lens back toward the crowd, shaking off the odd jolt in her chest. She didn't come here to feel anything, just to finish a favor and disappear. But fate had other plans. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind, calm, masculine. She turned slowly. There he was again. Rowan. Up close, he looked even more imposing. Tall, sharply dressed, but grounded, unapologetically direct. "Are you the main photographer today?" he asked, gesturing toward her camera. Mara hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Yes." He didn't question it, just nodded. A small tug at her pant leg made her look down. The same little girl, his daughter, she assumed, blinked up at her. "You know how to take real pictures?" the girl asked. Mira crouched to her level, smiling. "Only of people who are really beautiful." "I'm really beautiful," the girl said confidently. "No arguments here," Mira replied. The girl beamed. Rowan let out, the ghost of a chuckle behind them. Mira didn't look up right away. She focused on the girl. Maisie, someone had called her, and the way she settled comfortably into Mira's presence. No awkwardness, no forced small talk. Rowan was watching. She could feel it, not in a creepy way, but the cautious kind only single parents mastered. Not judgment, protection. Still, she met his eyes eventually. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. They stood like that a little longer than strangers usually do. Then someone called his name from the main tent. He gave her a final glance. "Maisie, let's go," he said gently. "Did you ever check with him?" Tom pursued. Maisie waved. "Bye, camera lady. Bye, beautiful." Mira called after her, something strange, stirring in her chest. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the lawn. Mira lifted the camera just in time to catch the last rays hitting the back of Rowan's suit. Ash carried his daughter away. Another moment, another click, and without knowing why, she whispered to herself, "This one's different." different. If you've ever found yourself in a place you didn't plan to be and ended up exactly where your heart needed, hit that hype button. Because sometimes the best stories begin with a lie that leads you to the truth. 3 days after the wedding, Mara Langford's phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then sighed, and opened the message. "Hi, this is Rowan Blake from the wedding, my brothers. I was wondering if you had a few shots of my daughter." Attached was a blurry phone snap of mirror behind the lens taken by someone else at the event. She was crouched near the flower arch, camera lifted. He had clearly asked around. She hasn't stopped. Talking about the camera lady. The second message read would mean a lot. Mira stared at the screen, debating. She shouldn't have taken the job. She definitely shouldn't have felt anything when he brushed his daughter's hair out of her face, but her fingers moved anyway. "I have a few. What's the best email?" His reply was immediate. The next morning, she sent over a small set. Maisie by the fountain picking petals, holding her father's hand. She expected that to be the end. Instead, that evening, "They're beautiful. Thank you." "Then would you be open to doing a photo session? Just Maisie and me. Nothing formal." Mira hesitated. "I don't usually take private clients." Another pause. "Maybe just for her. She thinks you're magic." She smiled. An hour later, she replied, "Okay, 1 hour, 1 location." He suggested a park on the city's edge. Casual. The sun filtered through trees, dappling the grass. Mira adjusted her lens as Maisie spun slowly on a picnic blanket, wearing a paper crown made from daisies. Rowan stood nearby, arms folded. He looked different, less polished, more real. "You're not wearing a suit," Mara teased, snapping a photo of him mid-laugh. He smirked. "I own 3 hoodies. One for royal events like this." Maisie giggled. "Daddy wore it when Is spilled paint on his tie." "You dumped paint on my tie. Accident?" She grinned. Mira laughed freely, fully. The session felt easy. Rowan didn't pose, just moved naturally with Maisie, lifting her onto his shoulders, helping her climb a tree, letting her stick flower petals to his face. Later, as the sun dipped low and Mira adjusted her settings, Maisie plopped beside her. "Do you take pictures of your family too?" Mira froze. Rowan looked up. She kept her eyes on the viewfinder. "No, not really." "Why not?" Her fingers tightened on the camera. "Just don't have many around." Maisie tilted her head. "You don't have a daddy?" The question was innocent, but it caught her breath. Mira lowered the camera. Rowan rose slowly, his gaze steady, not pity, just presence. "I did," Mira said softly. "A long time ago." Maisie blinked, then gently tucked a flower into Mira's braid. "You can be part of ours today." Rowan didn't speak, but when Mira glanced at him, something had changed in his eyes. Not curiosity, recognition. He saw something unspoken and didn't look away. Afterward, Rowan offered to carry her equipment. She declined, but he walked with her anyway. "You're good with her?" he said at the car. "She makes it easy." He hesitated. "You didn't have to say yes." "I almost didn't." "So why did you?" She looked at him then, at Maisie, twirling in the grass. "I don't know," Mara said honestly. "Maybe because she smiled at me like I belonged somewhere." Rowan nodded. "They didn't say goodbye. They didn't need to." Some moments don't close with a door. They open something else. The small attic room above Mira's favorite bookstore had always been her quiet place. Rent was cheap, light was soft, and the creaky window looked out over a city that never seemed to notice she was there. That was exactly how she liked it. She sat in the middle of the room now, still wearing her jacket from the shoot with Rowan and Maisie. Her camera bag lay half unzipped beside her. On every wall, strings of photos fluttered gently in the breeze. From the open window, portraits of families, weddings, newborns, elderly couples smiling in wrinkled joy. People, moments, all of them, not hers. Not a single photograph in the room had Mara Langford in it. She leaned back, scanning the wall behind her bed. 100 lives captured by her lens, and yet she felt invisible inside her own. Reaching for her camera bag, she dug past the lenses, the spare batteries, the cloths, until her fingers brushed against something folded in tissue paper. She hesitated, then gently pulled it out. A photograph. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, one corner water-damaged beyond repair. But the image still lived. Her parents standing on a wooden pier by the lake, arms around each other, sunlight, caught in her mother's curls. Her father's laugh frozen mid-air. Mira wasn't in the photo. She had taken it when she was 15, 2 years before the car crash that took them both. A few months before the fire that destroyed everything they left behind. It was the only thing that survived. She stared at it for a long time. Not long after, she tucked it carefully back into a hidden compartment in her bag. A few days later, Rowan Blake was gathering his things from the back seat of his car when something slid from Mira's forgotten camera bag, one she had handed him absent-mindedly when he'd helped her carry equipment after a location shoot. He bent to pick it up, expecting a lens cap or flash card, but it was a photograph. Old, fragile, personal. He paused. It felt wrong to look, and yet there was a sadness in the way it had been folded, tucked away, as if it was carried more like a weight than a keepsake. Two people in love, smiling, a lake behind them. He didn't recognize them, but somehow he knew this mattered. Rowan turned the photo over. No name, no date, just a tiny faded heart drawn in blue ink. That night, after putting Maisie to bed and finishing his last work email, Rowan did something he had not done in a long time. He sat still and thought about someone else's story. He looked at the photograph again, then carefully, almost reverently, placed it on his scanner. He adjusted the settings, cleaned the dust off the glass. He spent almost an hour editing the digital version, restoring colors, balancing shadows, sharpening edges before printing a larger version on fine art paper. He placed the finished print in a simple wooden frame. Then he wrote on a small card and slid it behind the frame. 3 days later, Mira returned home from another shoot to find a flat parcel leaning against her door. No name, no sender. She frowned, carried it inside, and opened it slowly. The moment she peeled back the wrapping, her breath caught in her throat. Her photo restored. Beautiful. And for the first time, her parents looked as if they were standing in the present, not just haunting a memory. Taped to the back of the frame was a small note handwritten in neat, steady letters. "You deserve to be remembered, too." No signature, but she knew. Mara sat down on the floor, the frame in her lap, her fingers trembling, and then she cried. Not the quiet, tucked-away tears she allowed herself every now and then, but full aching sob that cracked through years of being unseen, untouched, untethered. She cried for the 15-year-old who had lost everything, for the girl who thought being behind the lens was the only way to survive. She cried because someone had looked at a piece of her pain and chosen to restore it, not erase it, not fix her, see her. And suddenly, in the room lined with faces that were not hers, there was one that was, and that changed everything. The visits were never planned. Not really, but somehow Mira always found herself near the Blake residence on slow golden afternoons. Sometimes with a camera, sometimes with raspberry muffins from the cafe down the hill. It was not something they talked about. It just happened. Maisie would greet her with a squeal, running out barefoot from the garden, arms flung wide. Rowan would appear moments later pretending to be surprised, though Mira had seen the way he stood straighter whenever she arrived, how he looked like he'd been waiting without knowing he was. One Thursday, the three of them wandered into the wildflower field just beyond the neighborhood. Mira had discovered it weeks earlier. Now it had become their unofficial picnic spot. Maisie ran ahead, dress billowing, arms outstretched like a bird. Mira lifted her camera, Maisie framed by golden light, joy bursting from every inch of her. Then it happened. Maisie tripped over wild grass and went down hard. Rowan jolted forward, tense. But Mira was already there, her bag somewhere in the grass, crouched low on instinct. She gently brushed dirt from the girl's leg. Just a scrape. A tissue from her pocket wiped away the tear that hadn't yet fallen. "You're tougher than you look," Mira said, tapping Maisie's nose. Maisie hiccuped through a smile. "It stings. I know, but you landed next to a magic flower. Maybe it'll give you flying powers." Rowan reached them, breath caught. Mira looked up and teased. "Where's the dad of this fearless adventurer? She beat you to the ground." He said nothing. Not because of the words, but the way she said them. Calm, warm, present. It had been a long time since anyone tended to his daughter without asking how. There was a quiet strength in Mira, not just in her hands or her calm voice, but in how she treated Maisie, not as fragile, but capable. Later, as the sun dipped low, and they sat in the field, sharing juice boxes and bits of bread, Rowan kept, watching Mira from the corner of his eye. Her hair loosened in the breeze, catching the light, grass stains on her jeans. No makeup. She looked completely at home in the middle of wildflowers and laughter. And yet, something unknowable lingered behind her eyes. He found himself wanting to know what it was. Back at the house, as Mira packed up her gear, Maisie tugged on her sleeve. "Can you come again tomorrow?" Mira smiled. "If your dad lets me?" Rowan opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. Not because he didn't want to say yes, but because yes felt too small. That night, after Mira left, Rowan stood in the hallway outside Maisie's room, eyes on the framed photo Mira had taken at the wedding, the one of him lifting his daughter in a spray of golden light. It was just a moment, but now he could see what Mira had seen when she clicked the shutter. Love, protection. A man trying. He had never liked Photosoft himself. But this one he had framed. And beside it, a new photo had joined it. Maisie and Mira, both laughing, blurred in motion, petals falling like confetti. It was not a perfect photo, but it felt real. And for the first time in years, Rowan wondered what it would be like to have someone like Mira in every frame from now on. But as a stranger, but as part of the story. He wasn't sure what that meant yet, but the feeling in his chest was clear. Something had already begun. The studio air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, just the way Mira liked it. She was adjusting the lighting on a baby shoot when the chime above the door rang softly. Expecting a delivery, she barely looked up until she heard the voice. "There she is, my savior of the wedding weekend." Mira turned and froze. Her cousin Lacey stood at the entrance with her usual flair, big sunglasses, designer bags slung over one shoulder, and a smoothie in hand. "I came to pick up my lens," Lacey said, walking toward the counter. "Also, I still owe you a drink for covering that nightmare wedding. Did I tell you the groom's brother was some big shot CEO? God, I would have died if I'd messed that one up." Mira's hands paused on the reflector. Her throat went dry. "Actually," Lacey continued, flipping her sunglasses onto her head, "I think you made a better impression than me anyway. Must have been fate, huh? You standing in for me like that." A familiar voice cut through the studio from behind Lacey. Spanning in, Mira's heart stopped. Rowan stood at the doorway. Maisie's small hand curled in his. He wasn't smiling. Lacey turned confused. "Oh, hey, you're the one from the wedding. Mara didn't tell me you two kept in touch." Rowan's eyes didn't leave Mara. "You were not the hired photographer." Lacey's mouth dropped open. "Wait, you didn't know? Oh God. She clapped a hand to her face. Sorry, I thought she told you. The silence was thick, painful. Mara's lips parted, but no sound came. Rowan took a breath. Asmal one, shallow. So it was a lie. She shook her head quickly, finally finding her voice. No, it wasn't a lie. I didn't think it mattered. He let out a short laugh. Not amused, just hurt. It mattered. Maisie looked between them, confused and tense. Rowan, please. Mira tried again, stepping forward. It wasn't meant to trick you. I wasn't pretending to be someone I'm not. You were just filling in, he interrupted, repeating the words with a bitter edge. And I was just a job, a photo set, a good client to impress. Mara's eyes filled, but she didn't move closer. She knew better than to try. You said you did not want to be seen, he said, his voice quieter now. But you let me believe you were someone else. I was myself, she whispered. With you, But the rest of the sentence broke apart in her throat. Rowan looked at her for a long moment, and then without another word, he turned and walked out. Maisie's hand still in his. The studio door closed with a soft click. The silence that followed was louder than anything Mira had heard in years. Lacey winced. Okay, I think I really screwed that up. But Mira didn't respond. She walked slowly to the back room, closed the door behind her, and sat on the floor beside a box of unframed prints. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her chest ached. Of course, this would happen. Of course, she had known better than to believe something so good could last. Rowan Blake wasn't just a kind father or a man with quiet hands and steady eyes. He was someone who believed in honesty, in simplicity, in intention, and she had broken that. She hadn't meant to, but it didn't change the result. Mira leaned back, against the wall, blinking against the sting in her eyes. The old ache was back. The ache of being left behind again, of reaching for something that had never been hers to keep. She had no photographs of herself, and now, the only person who had started to see her for who she really was, had turned away without looking back. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steady. The kind of rain that made people cancel plans and forget promises. Mara stared. At the window, a single thought repeating in her mind like a heartbeat. This is what it feels like, Toby erased all over again. The box arrived 3 days after Rowan stopped replying. It was small, brown, no return label, but the handwriting on the front was careful, unmistakable. Rowan stared at it for a full minute on the kitchen counter before Maisie tugged at his sleeve. Is it a present? She asked. I'm not sure, he said. He opened it slowly, uncertain of what he expected, but not this. Inside lay a handmade photo album bound in soft gray linen. No company logo, no watermark, just a simple white card tucked beneath the cover. He picked it up. Mira's handwriting was delicate but steady. Thank you for giving me one day where I could exist inside something beautiful. That is more than most people ever do for someone like me. Mara Rowan didn't realize how tightly he was holding the note until the corner crumpled under his thumb. Can I see? Maisie asked, climbing onto the stool beside him. He nodded, still silent, and handed her the album. She opened it with the reverence of a child, who knew pictures meant more than decorations. The first page was a candid of Rowan and Maisie walking down the path outside the wedding venue. Rowan was mid-laugh, his tie loosened. Maisie had one foot off the ground, spinning on her heel. He did not remember anyone taking that. The next photo, him brushing Maisie's hair away from her forehead. The expression on his face, it was not posed, it was vulnerable, human. Then another, Maisie, standing on a wooden bench, arms wide, Rowan's hands just off frame, ready to catch her. Mira had captured that tiny tension, That silent, unspoken promise. Page after page. Nothing flashy, no artificial lighting, no edits. Just the Min. Quiet, often unnoticed moments. He picked Mo. Maisie's fingers paused on a photo of herself, leaning her head on Rowan's shoulder, both of them looking away from the camera. "I like this one," she said softly. Rowan cleared his throat. "Yeah," she nodded. "We look like a team." She flipped to the final page. There was a picture Mira had taken from far away. Rowan lifting Maisie into the air, light behind them, the world blurred around the edges. The kind of photo that felt like a memory already. Beneath it, a single typed line had been pasted in small, elegant font. "Real things aren't loud, but they last." Maisie looked up. "Do you think she's sad?" Rowan didn't answer. He couldn't. Something inside him, some wall that had held firm for years, was beginning to crack. Mira had not written to defend herself. She hadn't begged. She hadn't explained or argued or tried to change his mind. She had just given something without expectation, without ego, just truth. Rowan turned the page back to the photo of her note. He read it again. "Thank you for giving me one day." A breath caught in his throat. His eyes burned. All this time he thought she had stepped into their lives with a hidden reason. That she wanted something, that he had been foolish to open the door, but she had never asked for anything, never taken. She had only given. Even now, with the door closed, she left behind a piece of herself, not as a plea, but as a quiet offering. Maisie touched his arm. "Daddy." He blinked quickly. "Yeah, honey." "I want to see her again," she whispered. "I miss her." Rowan looked down at his daughter. Her honesty, her softness, her ability to say what he could not. "I miss her too," he said. And this time he did not swallow the emotion. He let it rise, let it sting, let it break. Because the truth was, Mira had seen them. Not the polished version, not the public CEO or the carefully groomed father-daughter photos for company websites. She had seen them and stayed until he pushed her away. Rowan wiped at his face roughly, then closed the album. "Where are we going?" Maisie asked as he grabbed his coat. He looked back at her, voice steadier than he felt. "To say thank you." The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Mira's tiny studio. Everything was ready. The whitewashed brick. Walls had been carefully scrubbed. Strings of fairy lights blinked gently around prints she had hung with clothes pins and quiet hope. Her favorite camera sat polished on the counter next to a tiny dish of peppermints. A chalkboard outside read, "Lanford Photography. Grand opening today" in cursive, that trembled at the edges. Mira stood behind the counter in a pale blue dress, hair swept back, cheeks touched with color she didn't quite feel. 9 a.m. No one came. She adjusted the frames, straightened a stool. 10 a.m. Still no one. She opened the door wider to let in more light. A breeze stirred the edge of the guest book she'd left open. The first line remained blank. "Your M." A delivery truck rolled past. No one stopped. Mira made herself a cup of tea. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt tight. Not from disappointment exactly, but from the echo of an old familiar ache. The kind that whispered, "Maybe you were never meant to be seen." She sat near the window alone, the quiet pressing in around her like fog. And then the bell above the door rang. She looked up. Maisie burst through the entrance, arms wide, her little voice ringing with joy. "Coer." Before Mira could stand, the child wrapped her in a tight hug, all sunshine and warmth. Behind her, Rowan stepped in, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a ribbon. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, not with confusion, not with caution, but with something steadier, clearer. Mira blinked, her breath caught somewhere between surprise and disbelief. "I wasn't sure anyone would come," she whispered. Rowan offered the package. We almost didn't, but I couldn't let today pass like that. Mira took the gift, fingers trembling, slightly as she untied the ribbon. Inside was a wooden frame, and in it, her photo, the one she had kept for years, the only picture of her parents, now restored, printed clean, but not altered, the frayed edges still visible behind the glass. At the bottom written in his familiar hand. Let's start your story from here. Mira's eyes filled before she could stop them. She pressed her hand to her mouth, the frame resting against her heart. Maisie tugged at her sleeve. We brought cookies too. Mira laughed softly through the tears. Of course you did. Rowan moved, closer, his voice low. I didn't know how to make it right. I kept thinking about that photo, how it survived so much, and how, maybe you did too. Mara looked up at him, her voice barely audible. I was so scared you'd think I lied, that I wasn't supposed to be part of your story. He shook his head. You were never pretending. You were the most real thing in it. And in the soft quiet that followed, something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just two people who had both lost too much. Finally letting goof the fear that they didn't deserve to be found. Mira set the frame gently on the counter. Rowan stepped forward. Their eyes met, and then without hesitation, he kissed her. It was not rushed. It was not rehearsed. Just a first kiss that felt like an answer. Surrounded by images of people caught in their most beautiful human moments. This one belonged to her finally, and she didn't need a camera to remember it. Mira stood in the center of her sunlit studio, laughing softly as a toddler in overalls smeared chocolate across his cheek, mid-shadow. His mother apologized in a panic, but Mira just grinned and captured the moment anyway. Perfect, she said, gently. It's not about posed smiles, it's about what's real. The studio, once silent and hollow, now pulsed with life. Children's giggles echoed off the walls. Strings of printed photos hung like banners. Newborns yawning, couples kissing mid-laugh. Grandparents, holding hands. Mira photographed families, lovers, friends, moments that mattered. And for the first time in her life, she was in them too. Sometimes Rowan would swing by between meetings, coffee in one hand, tie loosened. He'd lean against the doorframe, watching her work, like she was the only part of the day that ever slowed him down. He still ran his company, still wore suits, still took calls that Mira didn't pretend to understand. But now he came home early more often than not. He cooked dinner. He helped Maisie with her tiny science projects. He learned to live in the pauses, not just the deadlines. Maisie, now 6, had once asked Mira if she was a photographer. No, Mira had said with a mock serious face. I'm a storyteller, but I use light instead of words. Since then, Maisie introduced her to everyone as my storyteller. One afternoon, when the light slanted just right through the studio window, Mira stood beside the old photo of her parents, the one Rowan had restored. It now hung proudly on the wall beside a new photo. Her, Rowan, and Maisie, at the county fair, messy hair and cotton candy smiles. She looked at the two frames side by side, one from a past she had almost lost, one from a future she had never dared to imagine. Later that evening, the three of them walked to the hill behind their home. It was nothing grand, just a patch of grass, a few wildflowers, and a view of the setting sun. But it was theirs. Rowan spread out a blanket. Maisie curled up in his lap, holding a half-eaten apple. Mira set her camera on the tripod, adjusting the focus. You're always behind the lens, Rowan teased. Let someone else take the shot. She shook her head, smiling. Not this one. I want to be the one to frame it. She hit the timer, then hurried to sit between them. Rowan's hand found her shoulder just as Maisie wrapped her arms around them both. The shutter clicked. That was it. No makeup, no studio lights, just the golden wash of dusk, and the three of them captured in the quiet certainty of belonging. Mara looked at the camera's preview screen and felt her breath catch. It was the photo she never knew she needed, and maybe had been waiting to take her entire life. Her voice in the stillness was soft. "For years," she said, "I only lived behind the camera." Rowan turned toward her, brow furrowed in a smile. "And now?" She looked down at Maisie's tiny hand, curled in hers. "Now I know," Mara said. "This is the picture I've always waited to be in." Thank you for being with us through Mara's quiet journey, one that began behind the lens and ended in the frame of a family she never expected. If this story moved you, if you saw a part of yourself in her longing, her growth, or the way love can bloom from the simplest acts of grace, then don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more narratives that heal, inspire, and remind us what it means to belong. And if Mira, Rowan, and little Maisie left even a small imprint on your heart, go ahead and tap that hype button to help us share stories that matter. Thanks to watching.